Genocide of German Sinti and Roma.
In the short lecture that follows, I will focus on the history of the genocide perpetrated against this German minority, the Sinti and Roma. I will examine the background, the sequence of events, and the ideology behind this genocide, drawing primarily on the history of the former German Reich and the territories to which German Sinti and Roma were deported and imprisoned by the National Socialists. This will also include the sites of atrocity in Eastern Europe. Let me state clearly at the outset, this genocide was a European one. Sinti and Roma, members of this minority, were systematically persecuted and murdered in almost every occupied region of Europe. Given the scope, it would be impossible to detail every region here. Instead, my focus will be on the Germans, that is, the Sinti and Roma who lived in Germany as an autochthonous minority. To begin, I will clarify the terms Sinti and Roma, the collective self-designation, and explain why I unequivocally distance myself from the racist external label gypsies. That term, however, remains a source term. It was the perpetrators who used it to categorize, stigmatize, and ultimately murder these people. A pertinent definition of anti-Ziganism is offered by the political scientist Marcus End and the historian Laura Tittle, describing what anti-Ziganism means both historically and today. It is a construct of external attribution, assigning stereotypes and cliches to people on the assumption that they are collectively lazy, criminal, and asocial in a pejorative, demeaning sense. Yet anti-Ziganism also includes romanticizing notions of a carefree, joyful, collective gypsy life. These images reach far back, rooted in Central European traditions of art, culture, and music. Crucially, people were defined racially on the basis of ascribed physical traits, such as darker skin compared to the white majority, and the National Socialists seized upon these attributes, biologizing them. They claimed such characteristics were innate, present from birth, particularly in those who had mixed with the majority population, the so-called gypsy half-breeds, who became primary victims of the genocide, though not exclusively. It also affected those labeled full gypsies. This phenomenon grew over centuries. It is a form of bourgeois racism, grounded in the perception of a socially and economically inferior group held responsible for its own circumstances. Central to this was the collective lack of a fixed residence. They were seen as a nomadic people, fundamentally at odds with bourgeois and state values. Anti-Ziganism manifests in a spectrum, from the thought patterns I have outlined, the initial stage, as so often, to written and spoken language, and finally to concrete violence, physical and psychological, including verbal abuse. Its most devastating expression came in the National Socialist genocide. This brings me to the question of self-designation. Sinti and Roma is a self-chosen collective term, deliberately adopted by the international civil rights movement from the early 1970s onward. At the First World Roma Congress in London in 1970, Roma was established as an umbrella term for all groups speaking Romani. Subgroups include the Sinti, who have long identified themselves as such, primarily in Germany and other Western European countries like the Netherlands. Germany is also home to autochthonous Roma, who migrated from southeastern Europe starting in the 19th century. These terms were chosen consciously in opposition to the racist label gypsy. The aim was to resist it. Let us now turn to the situation of German Sinti and Roma in the 19th century, more precisely, from the mid to late 19th century in the German Empire. The German nation-state was formally founded only in 1871, yet revolutionary movements and attempts at nation-building had already shaped an ethnically defined principle of descent, the jus sanguinis. This did not recognize as German those born and living on German soil. Rather, Germany saw itself as a cultural nation bound by shared language, art, music, and heritage. Consequently, minorities long resident in Germany, Jews as a religious minority, Sinti and Roma, Poles, and others, were not regarded as integral to this cultural community of descent. This conception of the nation-state was part of the bourgeois conservative self-definition of Germany in the 19th century, a state that coalesced only in 1871 after wars against Austria and France. Sinti and Roma, often moving across imperial borders, were invariably labeled alien to the species and excluded from the German people. This is striking, given that migration in 19th century Europe was commonplace. Millions of Germans emigrated, for instance, to America, with a peak in 1871, the year the Reich was founded. Yet Sinti and Roma faced particular suspicion and exclusion. Some did assimilate, serving in the imperial army or holding bourgeois professions. But this offered no protection from systematic state registration and persecution, which began in earnest toward the end of the century. A key milestone came in March 1899, when the Bavarian Ministry of the Interior, under the jurist and policeman Alfred Dillmann, established a dedicated information service for gypsies. Dillmann compiled name lists of families externally categorized as gypsies and published them in a book. Persecution thus originated in Bavaria and marked the first step toward police action based on ethnic affiliation as a criterion for preventive prosecution on suspicion. The National Socialists later drew on police archives dating back to the imperial era. After the First World War and the collapse of the German Empire due to defeat, the Weimar Republic, the first German democracy, replaced the monarchy until 1933. One might assume this would have fostered integration of Sinti and Roma, but the opposite occurred, revealing deeply entrenched anti-Ziganism. Article 113 of the Weimar Constitution protected minorities such as Poles, Lithuanians, Danes, and Sorbs in their use of language and culture. Yet Sinti and Roma were excluded, partly because Romani was not recognized as a minority language. Paradoxically, from the mid-1920s, often called the Golden Twenties for economic growth, state persecution intensified dramatically. This was a consensus across the political spectrum, from the SPD and liberal parties to nationalist groups. Only the KPD criticized it as unconstitutional. Examples include special identity cards in Baden, a dedicated criminal police unit in 1927, and mandatory fingerprinting of those registered as gypsies in Prussia. In Bavaria, the rationale for the gypsy police was quoted as follows: "Their unsettled lives and estrangement from established norms continually disturbed the peace-loving population's security. Their irregular lifestyles deviated sharply from local customs, posing a constant threat to public order through criminality." This followed the Bavarian Landtag's law for combating gypsies, vagrants, and the work-shy, with a ministerial resolution presuming gypsy as a known term and explicitly tasking racial experts with defining it. Thus, the racist character of persecution and state oppression was already codified in the Weimar era, forming the foundation for later Nazi race laws and racial research. In 1929, Frankfurt established the first forced camp for concentrating Sinti and Roma. It is vital to emphasize that the National Socialists in 1933 did not invent the wheel anew. Anti-Semitism, too, built on existing currents. Yet unlike anti-Semitism, which experienced some discontinuity in Weimar, persecution of Sinti and Roma was seamless, stretching from the early modern period through the imperial era into the Republic. The Nazis continued and radically escalated it. The pivotal year was 1935, not only for Sinti and Roma, but especially for Jews, with the Nuremberg race laws. In a 1936 commentary, Reich Interior Minister Wilhelm Frick declared that, besides Jews, only gypsies regularly belonged to alien races. From 1935, racist and so-called crime-preventive persecution became inseparable, especially after the SS absorbed the police under Heinrich Himmler in 1936–37. From 1935, larger cities saw forced camps where Sinti and Roma were concentrated under severe daily restrictions. In 1936, the Race Hygienic Research Unit was founded at the Reich Health Office, making physicians complicit. In collaboration with police, criminal, regular, and Gestapo, they registered gypsies, produced ideologically driven racial assessments, and by war's end compiled some 24,000 dossiers on German Sinti and Roma. These formed the basis for mass deportations to Auschwitz-Birkenau, starting in spring 1943. Deportations to concentration and forced camps had begun earlier. In 1938, hundreds were sent to Sachsenhausen, Buchenwald, or Dachau, under the Work-Shy Reich action, labeled asocial. In 1940, another major deportation targeted the general government in occupied Poland. Under purported security measures, hundreds of families were abducted eastward for forced labor. Many did not survive. In this escalation toward systematic genocide, the appalling conditions in forced camps, often unrecognized post-1945 as detention sites, must be stressed. Lack of sanitation, widespread hunger, poor hygiene, arbitrary police raids, and daily violence. Survivor Lisbeth Steinbach recalled the Lukastrasse camp in Stettin, now Szczecin, Poland. I still remember a name from the criminal police: Nels. He came almost every day to our street and checked. If something didn't suit him, we got beaten. Race hygienic researchers repeatedly visited camps and homes, measuring people, taking facial casts, recording eye color, cataloging them thoroughly. They were deeply involved in preparing the genocide, including forced sterilizations, which were widespread. A 1938 medical journal article stated, "Rats, bedbugs, and fleas are natural phenomena, as are Jews and gypsies. All life is struggle. We must therefore gradually exterminate these pests biologically." This dehumanizing language reflects a pervasive ideology equating Sinti and Roma with vermin harmful to the German people. In 1939, fixed residence orders prohibited leaving assigned homes, with concentration camps threatened for violations. Systematic occupational bans and school exclusions followed. Reich-wide deportations to Auschwitz-Birkenau began in spring 1943. Primarily Germans, but also from occupied countries like the Benelux states. Confined in Section B-2E. In spring 1944, survivors, those enduring a year, were reselected. The able-bodied were sent to Buchenwald, Ravensbrück, or Mittelbau-Dora for war production. Men and women separated. The frail were gassed on the night of August 2nd to 3rd, 1944. Over 4,000 people. The grim toll. At least 75% of German Sinti and Roma did not survive. On forced sterilization. Consider Hugo Eichwald Rose, deported from Stettin to Sachsenhausen in 1938 as work-shy. Testifying at the 1947 Nuremberg trials, he recounted being promised release for consenting to sterilization. He agreed, was freed in 1940, and sterilized in 1941 near Stettin. Yet the promise was a lie. Rearrested in 1942 with family, he returned to Sachsenhausen. His father and 6 siblings were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1943. A Reich Central Office for combating the Gypsy menace at the Reich Criminal Police, part of the SS Reich Security Main Office, orchestrated these crimes centrally from the late 1930s. Finally, the European dimension. Victim numbers are disputed, ranging from at least 220,000 to 500,000 Roma and Sinti across Europe. Destruction varied by country and region. Figures for the former Soviet Union are especially elusive, with most killed in mass shootings and research delayed. Precise totals may never be known due to time's passage. Yet, unmistakably, the Nazis' will to annihilate spanned the continent.
Romani people, who are also referred to as Gypsies, are an ethnic group who originally came from India. They left India 1,000 years ago and gradually travelled westwards. They spread across Europe, settling in different countries. Gypsies mostly led nomadic lives and earned their living as they travelled. They lived in wagons and tents. However, in nearly every country where Gypsy people settled, they faced prejudice and persecution. In Europe before the First World War, many governments were beginning to take action to control their movements and curtail their freedom. Between the First and Second World Wars, there are accounts of Gypsies in Europe being singled out and sent to labour camps. Some authorities believed that Gypsies were subhuman, incapable of adapting to civilised society, and should be eradicated. Laws were passed preventing them from travelling, trading, visiting public places, and marrying outside their community. From 1936 in Germany, there was a policy to eliminate the Gypsy population entirely. Anyone who had any Gypsy blood at all, or resembled a Gypsy in appearance, would be classified as a Gypsy. European governments started cooperating with the Nazi Party in Germany to identify and register Gypsy people throughout Europe. After the start of the Second World War, as Germany invaded European countries, there was a concerted effort in each country to destroy the Gypsy race. Some Gypsies were rounded up and shot on the spot. Others were deported to concentration camps, where few survived. It is estimated that in total, over 500,000 Gypsies were killed. Despite this, even today there is little mention of the cruel atrocities that devastated the Gypsy race. Auschwitz, in Poland, was one of the largest concentration camps where Gypsies were incarcerated. Some Romani Gypsies in England are now keen to go there and learn more about what happened.
My name's Sally Woodbury. I'm a Romani Gypsy from the southwest of England, and I want to make this DVD with the Race Equality Council to find out what happened to my people and find out why it's been kept silent for so many years and not talked about, because it took 15 years for me to know that Gypsy people were killed in the Holocaust, and I want to make it children understand that when they see these pictures, these are actually the same Gypsies that they sometimes might have in their own classroom. They're human beings, these are your friends, and these friends could have actually been made to go to this place. The next stage of what we're going to do is go over to Poland, to Auschwitz. I want to go there to show my respects. I think it's going to be very tough. I think it's going to be very emotional. Somebody did say to me, when you go there you've got to dance, and I didn't quite understand what they meant by it, but they said Gypsies, when they go there now in Roma, they go there and dance to say thank you, we're here, you died but we're here and we're still alive and we've still survived. When I first got to the entrance and we pulled up, I got quite emotional about it, and I didn't know how I was going to cope. And it was very daunting, and the most shocking thing was how close it was to the village. It's very big, and it's two separate camps, which was a bit of a shock to me. I knew they were separate, but I didn't quite understand the geographics of it. And then the picture of the sign, of an aerial photograph of how big it was, that just completely shocked me, because it was just huge, and it was basically shocking to the scale it was to kill people.
Over 23,000 Gypsies were sent to Auschwitz, where there was a separate area to accommodate them. This was called the Zigeunerlager, or Gypsy camp. They were brought to the camp from all over Germany and the occupied territories, crowded into cattle trucks, without food and water and with no idea of what lay ahead. When each group arrived at the camp, they were registered, tattooed, and they had their heads shaved. They were then stripped naked, men, women and children together, and washed in freezing water. They slept in very overcrowded conditions in wooden barracks. Each building was designed to accommodate 400 people, but up to 1,000 were crammed in, with whole families sharing a small bunk. In the camp, men, women and children were forced to carry out hard labour. Thousands died of starvation, disease and brutality, but with more arriving each week, there was a continuous supply of workers. Dr. Joseph Mengele, the most notorious Nazi doctor, was assigned to work in the Gypsy camp. Witness accounts speak of Mengele befriending Gypsy children, but then carrying out many horrific medical experiments on them, like injecting ink into their eyeballs to change the colour of their eyes. Both adults and children were subjected to painful and often lethal medical procedures and then killed so Mengele could dissect their bodies. Women were routinely sterilised. In England, word had got back to Gypsy communities that something awful was happening to Gypsies in Europe. This fear was not unfounded, as in 1942 the Nazi Security Service was collecting information on Gypsies in Great Britain.
We would hear a lot of tales from soldiers who had come back from foreign parts and tell us. We would ask, did you see any Romanis there? And then they would say yes, but the Romanis were all rounded up and put into ghettos, and of course eventually were gassed in the concentration camps. There was a lot more focus on the Jews, and it soon died away about the Romani people. They didn't really put much thought to them. Didn't hear much about the Romanis at all. Yes, there was a lot of talk amongst Romanis in this country, in England and Wales, but there wasn't a lot of news in the newspaper about the Romanis that were killed. Well, we did hear that they said they fought to the last, and we thought we'd be the first to be killed.
Going to the exhibits, that was the most emotional bit for me. And the lady that took us around and told us different things, and she was mainly talking about the gypsy community, that was very upsetting, very emotional. To see the hair, and you can't even describe it, you can see it on pictures, but until you're there and actually see it, and this was only obviously a small part of hair, because the rest had been sold in years gone by. I always heard that the hair was used to make things, but it wasn't until the tour guide explained to us in detail. It was so unbelievably shocking, and there was actually a roll of fabric there laid, which is in the pictures, which was given to the museum after the war, which was from a fabric factory. It used to be horse's hair and wool, but that was more expensive than human hair. And when she said that horse's hair was worth more money than human hair, that was completely shocking, because a human's life was not worth as much as a horse. And it was just the shoes, and then the adult shoes affected me, but what affected me more was then there was a separate compartment of just children's shoes, and I was just looking at the individual shoes, just thinking about the individual people who it could have been, whose lives, like children's lives, and that was very, very sad. There is a small gas chamber left on Auschwitz 1. It was used for many things, but it was also used as a gas chamber, and I was really dreading to go through that, and I actually said I wouldn't do it, and then my sister said to me, go through it to show respect the gypsies that died, to say you come out the other side. So I built up the courage to go into the door, but as I got to the door, I think the vision of seeing the model of the gypsies with the kids, I just had this emotion come through me that I could imagine walking through there with my kids, and I just couldn't, and I just got very, very upset. It was just too upset to walk in. I couldn't do it.
Sally, why couldn't you go in the gas chamber?
I just imagine taking your children in there. It's just, I can't go in there. I'm lucky I got through the door, I think. Did you go right through?
Yeah,
Is there a memorial in there?
there's some candles in there. In 1944, an order was given that all the gypsies in Auschwitz should die. On the 2nd of August, those men and boys still capable of working were sent from Auschwitz to work in other camps where the majority would eventually die. That same night, the women, the children and the sick were forced into the gas chambers. Accounts from other prisoners say the gypsies fought to the very end.
We were walking around the museum, and I could see this little old man and two young men from America talking. And he said, I lived in Krakow, and then he went on to say that I told him that we'd been to Auschwitz, and he told me that he'd been to Auschwitz. The minute he told me he'd been to Auschwitz, I knew he was a survivor. And he undone I actually helped him undo his shirt, because he was struggling to undo his shirt, and I helped him, and he showed me his numbers on his arm, and he asked us what we were there for, and we told him we were making a DVD about the gypsies, and a shiver went right down our spines, because as soon as we said the word gypsies, he said, oh my God, the night the gypsies died. I can remember the night the gypsies died. And he told us how they were all put into the gas chambers. It was over the 2nd and 3rd of August, and there were so many of them that ovens couldn't cope with them. And he said they had pits, ash pits, and they literally burnt the bodies. He said, and it's awful to talk about this, but people need to know that the smell of flesh lingered for days and smoke, and that in some cases some of the bodied people and children were still alive, and they still pushed them into the fires. And it was just like it was meant to be, because I never thought in my day I would ever meet a survivor. He wasn't a Roma gypsy, but he was a survivor, and he said, I always tell people what happened to the gypsies because it was so sad. I would say I didn't show my respects. I felt I wanted to, but how can a bunch of flowers and me looking at a memorial, when I show my respects will be the day that we can get people to recognise what has happened. So yes, I'm glad I showed my respects in that way, but I was sad that I can't do it enough, and that's why I will continue to do it and continue to fight for them to be recognised.
There is still widespread persecution and racism against gypsies today all over Europe. What frightens us is that the language used about gypsies in England today echoes the language used about gypsies in Nazi Germany.
In 2001, an exhibition on the history of the Holocaust against the Sinti and Roma was opened on the grounds of the Auschwitz main camp, which have since been converted into a museum. The exhibition is divided into 2 rooms. At the beginning of the exhibition, the visitor symbolically leaves the historical site of the memorial and enters the core room of the exhibition. Here, the life of Sinti and Roma before the persecution by the Nazi regime is shown. Sinti and Roma were integrated into social life before 1933 as neighbors or work colleagues. Many had fought as soldiers in the First World War and had been highly decorated. They were citizens of the nations in which they and their ancestors had lived for centuries. The family photos and documents shown in the exhibition underlined the normality of everyday life between neighbors in various European states. The exhibition illustrates how this normality was gradually destroyed by the Nazi regime. On the basis of racial ideology, Sinti and Roma, just like the Jews, were gradually disenfranchised, deprived of their livelihoods, and finally deported to the extermination camps. Five 500,000 Sinti and Roma were murdered in Nazi-occupied Europe. The exhibition could only be realized through the support of numerous survivors of the Roma Holocaust. For this exhibition, they entrusted the Documentation and Cultural Center of German Sinti and Roma with their private family pictures.
It was early in the morning, maybe 2, 3.
Dark outside?
Yeah. And they came in, and they didn't just knock on the door and came in, they slammed the door open. They said, "Get your clothes on and let's go." And my grandmother said, "Can we pack a suitcase?" "No, just what you got on." So that's what we did. We got our clothes on and go. I was happy. I thought that something exciting happened, you know. What did I know?
And you were about how old then? Or do you remember the year?
9 or 10, or close to 10.
What year was that then?
Well, I'm 67 now.
So you were 9, so it was about 1939?
Yeah.
Do you remember what time of year it was?
Well, it wasn't a winter yet.
And where did they take you?
And they took us to the train station.
Tell about that.
And they put us in to the... it wasn't a train station where you sit, you know. There was a whole bunch of people in there. It was just like where you put the cows. Where you put the cows and horses, and that's where they put us. There was a lot of people in there. And they put us in there. And everybody asked, "Where are we going?" "Shut up." Well, then we went in the train a little bit, and then they stopped, and then we went with the train a little bit, and then they stopped, you know, and they give us something to eat sometimes, and sometimes they don't.
What did they give you to eat?
A small piece of bread,
Anything to drink?
water. I was glad for that. I thank God for everything I got. That's all I got to know. I thank them for everything. And maybe that's why I'm here.
How many days do you think you were on the train?
Oh, maybe 10 days. 10 days.
Did you ever get off the train when they stopped?
No.
Did they ever open the doors?
We were just a bunch of cows.
How many do you think were in there?
In that train. That is a thing that I don't, ugh, terrible. They had to go to the bathroom in there and everything. The little kids screaming for hunger, and I don't know how people can do that, you know? Really, how can they do that to little children? Little children got deadly sick.